Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
My friends, winning this war in Iran is not something that just happened by accident. This is something that the United States has been investing in for a long time, not specifically in fighting Iran, but fighting people who want to cause, death and destruction to Americans and to our allies around the globe. I want to talk about this today because this is where the concept of peace through strength comes from and why it matters. It's not just some intellectual pursuit. This is a real, very important foundational premise that we all must accept and get on board with. The surest way to peace in the world today is by having, listen, I understand America is not perfect, but this country is good. Having enough firepower, enough strength and resolve on the side of the good guys to defeat the bad guys. That's basically what this comes down to. I'm going to give you some updates as to what is happening in Iran as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about Kristi Noem, time permitting. And of course, anything we don't get to here today, we will include in our inner circle, which is absolutely free to join. You can join, it's an email. You can join by texting the word truth to 317-785-1030, 317-785-1030. Okay, that's where we're headed today, my friends. But are you tired of spending your hard-earned money at businesses that turn around and support leftist causes? It's exactly why we here at the Todd Huff Show created Freedom Marketplace. It is a free searchable directory of businesses that share your conservative values, businesses that have vowed not to support leftist candidates or leftist causes. All you have to do is head on over to freedommarketplace.net. You can create a login, but you don't have to. There's no strings attached. It doesn't cost anything. It's just good, patriotic businesses pushing in the same direction that you are pushing. Check it out today, freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net, liberty and business for all. All right, let's get into it here today, my friend. I don't know if you've seen this story in the New York Post. It will be in the Inner Circle newsletter, along with all the other links to the stack of stuff, which are background information on the things we talk about here on the program each and every day. Or you can just go to the NewYorkPost.com and search for this. But I want to start by referencing this article. It was published, just last night, it looks like, last evening. Ronnie Reyes, headline here, How Israel Killed Ayatollah Khamenei with a Missile from Space. That's the headline of the article. And it's got a diagram here that, of course, I can't show you since you're listening to the program over radio airwaves or as a podcast, but I would like to show you this. I can't. It looks like an image of an F-16. That's what it looks like to me. And it's got this F-16 flying, high in the atmosphere, and it's releasing a missile. And then the missile, of course, accelerates, and then the missile goes up. The missile goes up from the altitude of the F-16, leaves the atmosphere. So it says here, Israel fighter jet launches Blue Sparrow missile. That's what this missile is called here. That's the first step. Then it says the booster rocket sends missile out of Earth's atmosphere, making it travel further and more difficult to intercept. So it leaves the atmosphere, goes up into space, begins to cruise a little bit up there, and then once it begins to lock in on its target, step 3 here says the warhead separates from booster rocket and locks onto its target, and it basically falls out of space back into the atmosphere. Step 4 here says missile re-enters atmosphere and strikes target. It's got this little explosive graphic. It's got a little tag next to it that says Presidential Complex, Tehran, Iran. That is how Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's, that's how he was taken out. So the article here says Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's reward came from heaven. Israel used a powerful ballistic missile that flew to the edge of space before plummeting to Earth and blasting Iran's unsuspecting supreme leader and dozens of his top henchmen last Saturday. So technically, I guess it doesn't I don't know. It's right there on the envelope, the threshold between the atmosphere and space. The Blue Sparrow, a missile that can fly for 1,240 miles and leaves atmosphere. Again, it's right there. I guess it technically leaves it. It's right there on the threshold. It leaves the atmosphere, and then it says it crashes down. It was used by Israel during Operation Epic Fury, killing Khamenei and his cohorts. But so intense was the impact that debris was found in western Iraq, according to Israeli sources. The surprise attack came together last week after Israeli officials deliberately gave the impression that the military was standing down for the weekend. An Israeli Defense Forces official told reporters Thursday, "We released photos and information suggesting that IDF staff and senior command were going home for Shabbat dinner." That's of course the Sabbath, said the official, who did not want to be named, according to the BBC. While the high-ranking officials made a show of leaving the headquarters to enjoy the weekend, they quickly donned disguises and covertly returned to the facility to prep for the attack on Khamenei's compound. So you have deception, you have, they were setting up the regime, because what happened was that the Iranians bought it. They thought that there wouldn't be an imminent attack. And so the officials all ended up going to Khamenei's compound. So it comes in here. Sorry. Had a pop up on my screen as I'm reading this article. So here's what it says. Prior to the attack, Khamenei was believed to be spending most of his evenings in a deep underground bunker to shield himself from any attacks. Mossad, Israel's top intelligence agency, was able to keep tabs on where the regime's senior leaders' bodyguards were stationed when they arrived at Khamenei's compound on Pasteur Street in the heart of Tehran, the IDF officials noted. The spy agency had access to the guards' schedules and movements, with one camera in the vicinity proving pivotal in tracking the situation. Did you also read? I read this elsewhere. This is not in the stack today. I read this earlier in the week, that Israel had also hacked traffic cameras in Iran. So they hacked into the cameras. They had done this, I think, years ago. And that was one of the ways they were getting intelligence, right? They, instead of having eyes on the ground, which I'm sure they had human assets as well, or other techniques of gathering human intelligence, but they were using traffic cameras in Tehran. So isn't it interesting that the regime, the Iranian regime's totalitarian desires, which, look, we have traffic cameras here, we have cameras everywhere, but the desires of the regime to keep their eyes on the people actually allowed the Israelis to keep an eye on them as well. So they were watching this, and it says all developments were then transmitted back to Tel Aviv, telling Israeli officials or letting Israeli officials know the perfect time to strike. Israeli F-15 jets and other aircraft were deployed at around 7:30 a.m. Iran time, with the aircraft unleashing 30 missiles, including Blue Sparrows, which are those missiles, by the way, that strike from space after leaving the Earth's atmosphere, at the heart of the Ayatollah's compound about 2 hours later. So, listen, the article goes on here, but I just want to pause here. I want to pause here because this is important to understand. The United States of America, now we're talking here about Israel, but we know that the United States of America has capabilities like this, or even that are greater than this technologically and militarily speaking, right? The United States is the measure, and you can say Israel is too. As far as it comes to advancement of the military technology, the ability to strike an enemy pretty much wherever we feel like it. I don't want to overstate it, but I mean, there's been a big history, a long history of that in that region of the world, where Israel and the United States have been able to pull some of these things off that seem incredibly impossible, at least from the perspective of other regimes, other governments. And so, but there's a reason for this, right? When you go back to the Constitution here in the United States, and you look at what our founders framed. They said that our government has certain responsibilities, right? It's called the consent of the governed. I love the founders were brilliant in how they set this up here. They said, instead of us, the founding fathers who helped lead a successful American Revolution and the end of British rule in the colonies, we acquired our own independence. Instead of us then establishing ourselves as the next ruling class, as the next tyrants, dictators, kings, and everything else, we're going to say that we recognize that God has given his created beings, human beings, the, freedom and autonomy, and that liberty and rights come from him. And instead of a new government coming in and saying, hey, we're going to tell you what you can do, how you can behave, and we're going to establish ourselves at the top of that metaphorical societal and government pyramid, we're going to say it's up to you, the American people, to decide. You have to give your consent to the governed. It's not that you have to give your consent to the government. It's not that the government gives you its consent on how you can behave. And so they framed this system on a radical idea that, by the way, has transformed how people live on planet Earth in incredible ways, incredibly good ways. And so they then, after the American Revolution and after an initial attempt through the Articles of Confederation to build a national government, they had the Constitutional Convention. They knew the Articles of Confederation didn't give the government quite the power it needed to be able to do its job. And so they had the Constitutional Convention. They framed a constitution that gave the government slightly more powers. It gave the federal government more ability to manage some of the things it was tasked with doing. But what they were trying to do was give the government enough power to do its job, what the consent of the governed, what the consent of the people was, to say, hey, you can do this, but nothing more. We realized in our first attempt, in an effort to keep you from getting too big, we didn't give you quite enough. So now we'll give you a little bit more that allows you to be able to do your job. And if you look at the job, right, you read even the basic preamble of the United States Constitution, one of the things in there is the common defense. Provide for the common defense of this nation. And that is a core principle. Now, we have deviated from that document in so many ways, right? And we have government that is wasting money on, I mean, you could pick any number of things. Doge uncovered a lot, or you could talk about the daycare fraud, or any number of things with welfare fraud, Social Security fraud, right? Doge uncovered that there were people that were allegedly 120 or 140 years old or some such thing collecting Social Security. That was reported. Of course, the left denies it, claiming instead that our government would never make a mistake, never make a mistake like that. Give me a break. But regardless, we've got into all these other things. They're promising that they can lower the levels of the seas, when in reality, none of this stuff is really what the United States government should be doing. But at its core, one of the core principles is defense. Now, this leads us into this discussion with Iran. What is necessary logically when it comes to the good guys being able to win requires that the good guys have more firepower than the bad guys. The good guys have more capabilities than the bad guys. You can't stand up to a bully in the schoolyard if you can't at least give a bully a run for his money, and ideally be able to whoop the bully. I know that this is wild talk to many of the soft Americans in the world today, not for people that understand how things work in the real world, but this sort of talk is just crazy to people who think you can talk your way out of problems and that you can pacify those who want to literally destroy you and wipe you off the face of the planet. You may have seen, by the way, Caroline Leavitt have a showdown in the White House briefing room the other day with Caitlin Collins. And Caroline Leavitt told Caitlin Collins, we're fighting a regime that literally wants every person in this room dead. Do you understand this? I don't know that Caitlin Collins does. Caitlin Collins has other concerns, which include helping the Democrat Party regain political power in this country. I don't know that they understand that or accept that or believe that, or they probably believe if you have a figure that you elect as president like Barack Obama, who goes over there and says certain things to these people, that they're going to suddenly love us and not want us dead. That's simply living in a fantasy world. So there are real problems, and there are real people out there that want each and every one of us dead. I hate to say it. I hate to be the bearer of the bad news here, but that is a fact. On 9/11, Al-Qaeda killed nearly 3,000 Americans indiscriminately. There were children, there were elderly, there were, people who worked for in the Pentagon, in the military. You had people who were pilots and moms and civilians and business people who died on the aircraft. You had people working in the trade towers, of course, who were capitalists, which they hated as well. You had indiscriminate killing. There were daycares in the trade towers in New York City. I think they were on the lower levels, but nonetheless, these are all sorts of things, right? In the trade towers when they were struck, and people died. I read stories. I've read about the people who died on 9/11. I read their stories. I do this regularly to just remember what really is at stake in underlying the problems that we face today. And it's a deep-seated hatred for all people who do not live under Sharia law and who become converted to Islam. I'm telling you, these people hate us. They think that they're justified. They think that they are, in fact, called to kill those who do not convert to Islam. That is who is running or was running the Iranian regime. These people are dangerous. They will stop at nothing. They have shown us that. They have made themselves very well known to the world. And so it is necessary for our government, for our nation, to have enough firepower to remain superior over these folks, up to and including the point of the types of weapons I just read about here in this story at the New York Post. This sort of thing is necessary. Now, this is not meant to be a case to say that we should just spend whatever some hawkish lover of war politician wants to spend in growing our military. But there is a clear reason to have a strong and capable military. There's a clear reason to invest in developing our military, to create the best war fighters possible, to create the most technologically advanced fleets possible, while also having fail-safes built in so that if someone is able to take out, say, for example, use an EMP attack, we don't want to be vulnerable to that. We want to still be able to operate. But the point is, we want the best and the most effective tools by which we can defend ourselves and address hostilities around the globe. And that is what we have. And that, my friends, is the foundation of this concept of peace through strength. You don't just get strength so that you can go out and then be the new bully. You acquire strength so that you can cause the real bullies to stand down. You get strength so that you can protect your people here in the homeland and abroad and wherever they are in the entire world. You get strength to be able to do that. And so this is why investing in these sorts of things matter. And we won't know maybe ever all of the technology and all of the techniques and strategies and tactics that were employed here. But we have just a glimpse here. And this is why it's important that we continue down this path. I got more to say about this. We'll get into other issues regarding this conflict, but I'm up against the time. My friends, you've worked hard, you've made smart choices, and now it's about making sure that effort counts, not just today, my friends, but for the future. Full Suite Wealth helps forward-thinking people with a coordinated approach to wealth, legacy, and legal planning, including private equity, including private credit, including options strategies. They'll help you see the big picture, they'll help you plan ahead, and they'll help make your success truly matter for the people that you care the most about. The goal is a plan that stands the test of time. Visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. My friends, time out for me. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Peace through strength. Now, this is not meant to give military leaders, hawkish politicians, a blank check. It's not. But the idea that we need to stop investing in our military and stop doing the work necessary to create the greatest fighting force that we possibly can, the greatest fighting force on planet Earth, that should be the goal. It's naive to think that we don't need a strong military. I don't understand the people who refuse to understand this. I understand if people don't like war. Nobody likes, well, maybe some people do, but nobody likes war. Nobody wants to be at war unnecessarily. Now, we can disagree as to where those lines are drawn, but nobody is really, or very, very few people are just looking for a new war. I understand that the people who have a financial interest in developing weapons and technologies and so forth that are used in war, there is a temptation for them to seek ways to get more profit. I understand that. But I also understand that those who live in a fantasy world and who think that you can simply hold hands and sing "We Are the World" with your adversaries who want you wiped off the face of the planet, who say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, who chant death to America, death to Israel, who've openly called for the annihilation, the wiping of the nation of Israel off of the planet. Those people cannot be dealt with smiles and handshakes. They have to be dealt with in the ways that they understand, and that is through brute force. And when it is time to use it, we must be ready and able and capable to do the job. And right now we've done. In fact, let me give you some some updates here. Here we go. This is what our military has accomplished so far. We're a week into this, right? U.S. and allied forces have destroyed roughly 30 Iranian naval vessels, 30 of them. We've blown them up. We've sunk them, taken them out. Missile attacks from Iran have been reduced by roughly 90% since the start of the campaign. 90% reduction in Iran's ability to strike back with drones and missiles. Nearly 2,000 military targets have been struck across the Islamic Republic of Iran during the opening phase of this operation. An Iranian drone carrier was struck and set on fire during the operation. This, my friends, is why global military capability matters. It's why it matters that we have aircraft carrier fleets. It's why it matters that we have military bases around the world. Yes, I understand that there comes a risk. Look, there are tensions. There are tensions on all of these things, right? All these important steps. There's tensions when the missiles fly. There's tensions when you try to build a military base in, for example, Saudi Arabia. If you remember, that's one of the things that Osama bin Laden was very upset about. One of the many reasons why he hated the United States of America was because we built bases and had a military presence in the Holy Land. Of course, Mecca and Medina is where the Prophet Muhammad, there's, of course, his history in the holy cities to the Islamic faith of Mecca and Medina. And that was considered offensive to him, that the infidel would have bases in that nation. But it's why it matters. It's why it matters that we have these bases, we have these carrier fleets. It's why we can respond virtually anywhere in the world within, quicker than anyone can possibly imagine with how we're set up around the world today. And that rapid response projects power and it deters our enemies. If it took us weeks or months to respond or get situated to respond to missile attacks, don't you think there would be more of them from the people who hate us? Carrier groups, bombers, submarines. I didn't talk about the bombers, the ability. Think about when we struck Iran last June. We had bombers take off here in the U.S. mainland. Heck, I think, didn't they take off in Missouri? That's where I want to say they took off from. They refueled during the flight. They flew over the targets. They dropped their bombs and they returned. I don't know if they returned to Germany. Maybe they turned around and came back. But we have the capability of doing that. It's absolutely incredible to think about. Intelligence networks. I already talked about how the Israelis anyway, had hacked into traffic cameras in Iran. Who knows? Who knows how we're keeping eyes on threats around the world? This is necessary. Absolutely necessary. No other country on earth can operate at this scale globally with the quickness, the agility of the United States. U.S. submarine torpedo attack sinking an Iranian frigate. It's just, the list goes on and on. Deterrence is a real thing, my friends, when our strength and our power is absolutely overwhelming to the enemy. Weakness invites aggression. In fact, I've said on this program for years, it's one of the core principles of my political beliefs is that American weakness is provocative. American weakness is provocative. It's not provocative for us to be strong. I mean, it certainly causes other nations to act certain ways, and they use it as an excuse as to why they hate the United States of America and all that. But if you want real aggression on the world stage, look at what happens when the United States is weak or it has a weak leader. And I look back at what happened. Look back at things like Benghazi. Look back at things like the Afghanistan withdrawal. I mean, we left 15,000 people, at least for the initial withdrawal phase. We abandoned people under the Biden regime. He was more interested in getting a headline that says Biden ends longest U.S. military, war, military, whatever they wanted to call it, in American history on the eve of 9/11 or that time of year. He wanted that headline, and we paid dearly for that. It was mismanaged unbelievably. American weakness is what is truly provocative. So, on the other side of this, we have to be aware that there are incentives that exist that for people who provide, say, weapons or technology, those sorts of things, the profit that they get from selling those equipment, that equipment or that technology to the government certainly is a motivation to them. And more of this equipment is used during war. And so there are certainly pressures that could exist, that do exist, that could lead people to make decisions that are more hawkish or more trigger happy, if you will, to start a war, to get involved. But friends, those incentives exist everywhere in everything that we do. We still have to decide in our minds for ourselves where we land, as we have competing voices that are trying to get us to move one way or the other constantly, because it's more aligned, that where we end up on that continuum is more aligned with where they are. If they can get us to become a little bit more hawkish in this example, get us to be a little bit more trigger happy, they can sell more product. But likewise, you have others who have interests on the other end of the spectrum, and we have to still land somewhere on the spectrum. We can't not be on the spectrum of absolute pacifist, or at the one end, and at the other end, just a warmonger, a person who loves war. We all have to land somewhere intellectually, and the place to land is, in my opinion, is clearly to say, build a military that is capable of dealing with anything in an overwhelming way, as quick as possible, with protecting the interests of the United States and her people as best as possible, so that we can deal with anything globally in such a way that nobody wants to mess with us. That's where we've landed. And candidly, that's kind of, my friends, where we are. There's a lot of confusion out there about kratom. You've probably heard the headlines, and most of those headlines are based on synthetic junk that is not real kratom at all. Real kratom is natural. It's tested. It's handled with care. That's exactly what you get from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. They're a family-run company. They partner directly with farmers in Indonesia. Every batch is lab-tested for purity. No chemicals, no fillers, no shortcuts. This is a trusted herbal option that's been used for generations, and it's a real alternative for people looking for something that doesn't come with a warning label that's a mile long. You can start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Use coupon code Todd Huff. You'll get 10% off your first order. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. And yes, time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I know it's a sad, sad time. Last segment of the week, but never fear. You can always check out things you may have missed this week on our website, toddhuffshow.com, or the best way is to sign up to get the Inner Circle newsletter, where there will be additional content, things we don't get to. You can text the word truth to 317-785-1030. Again, text the word truth to get this free email called the Inner Circle. 317 785-1030. Just text the word truth there. But I know it's a sad time, but friends, you know one of the biggest challenges we have as conservatives is finding ways to ensure our values align with the way that we live our lives. That includes how we invest our money. That's why I love what the team at 48 Financial is doing. They specialize in biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that do not align with our faith and our values, so we're not funding things that go completely against what we believe in. Plus, they'll do the heavy lifting for us, so all we have to do is complete the assessment. Tell them the investments we have, and they will then tell us to what degree our investments line up with our values. You can take that assessment. It's quick. It's easy at 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd. 48 Financial, because our money should work for our values. And friends, your money certainly should not work against your values. All right. Really quickly, I said I was going to mention at the beginning of the program, Trump has fired Kristi Noem as Homeland Security Secretary, which, of course, that leads us to the funding issue with DHS as well. Congress is still fighting over that. It's the one part of our government that's not being dealt with here right now. But Kristi Noem has been fired. She has been replaced by Oklahoma Senator Mark Wayne Mullen. That's who is reportedly replacing her. Trump has, apparently, there's an article at Axios, which is in the stack of stuff, and it will be emailed out today in the news or in the inner circle. But according to that article, the reason that she was fired was that she claimed that Trump approved a $220 million advertising campaign. And Trump says it's not the way that went down. So anyway, I don't have the time to get into that. I want to mention one other thing that I referenced earlier this week. Another article here. This is at, this also is at Axios. Headline, this is exclusive with Axios. Trump says he must be involved in picking Iran's next leader. Now, yesterday, you heard me talk about some of the problems the United States has had as it has tried to get into regime change. That's for those of you who were around in the early 2000s, you will have heard that phrase bantered about, regime change. And I think, well, I like to think some of us at least have learned our lesson. So, of course, Khamenei's dead. The Iranian regime is destabilized. We've killed dozens of other leaders. There's an internal power struggle that's certainly underway in Iran. You've got people rising up. And so while the U.S., let's list the options here, right? So my position yesterday was, look, the United States should not be the person to pick the leader. But does that mean that the United States shouldn't be involved at all? Trump's out there saying he must be involved. That's the headline here at Axios. He must be involved in picking Iran's next leader, just as he was in Venezuela. So the options are simple, right? You've got, we decided Khamenei wasn't going to be the leader anymore. He was too big of a risk, a threat, a danger to society and so forth. So he's not a potential option. Of course, now he's dead. Neither are the dozens of others that we've killed. There was another leader. Khamenei's son was considered. His name is Mojtaba Khamenei. He's the son of Ali Khamenei. He was the most likely successor. But Trump called him a lightweight. This guy's not going to cut it. We need someone else. So you either hope for the Iranian people to rise up, which I think is an important part of this, and to deal with their government not just have a new leader, but hopefully have a new government altogether. You can just cross your fingers and hope and stay out of it completely, which we're already in it. So it's a question of degrees. It's a question of where do you draw the line. I don't think that we should be picking the leader, but I don't know that we want to stay completely silent either. But of course, there's problems with all of these things. You could have complete chaos. You don't want people thinking that the United States is turning Iran into a puppet state. But what happens if the new leader is just as bad or comparably bad or, heaven forbid, even worse than the old leaders? These are all relevant questions to ask. And I think we have to find the balance between not initiating the regime ourselves while at the same time realizing that we do have a vested interest. Trump wants a pretty active role in this, it sounds like. So we got to find where that balance is, my friends. So we'll see where this ends up. But I'm out of time here. Got to run. Have a great weekend. SDG.